All right, so let's get on with it. The first panel we're going to have is Innovations in Design and Construction. So this includes the winners and the finalists. It will be moderated by Jenny French, who is an assistant professor in practice of architecture here at the GSD, and we'd like very much to claim her as a member of our faculty advisory committee. I won't go through her full bio, which is in the program, but just to point out that she has her own practice, the French 2D, an architectural studio based in Boston, a recipient of the 2019 Architectural Record Design Vanguard Award. And Jenny's own practice includes some very interesting housing itself, including micro-units and co-housing developments as well. So Jenny, we're really pleased to have you here to moderate this first panel.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Chris and David Luberoff, for inviting me to moderate this panel, and to Clark for having us all here today as well. And I'm just going to speak very briefly, but I wanted to touch on something that I thought was really pretty critical in the description of the criteria for the prize itself. Just looking at housing innovation solutions that were ambitious, feasible, and scalable. And I think the three panelists that we're going to hear from today, David Alade, Pete Gombert, and Larry Pace, all represent those qualities in their respective companies so well, taking on really large-scale and complex issues with ambitious, yes, but still grounded solutions. And I also think, importantly, setting forth examples of ways forward to produce housing affordability, not just in their own respective companies, which are scaling, but also as models for new design and construction and development companies that have yet to be founded. So without further ado, I would like to welcome our first panelist, one of the founding partners of Century Partners, David Alade.
All right, how's everybody doing? Excellent. So I have no idea how this works. I just hit this button. All right, excellent. Well, hello everybody. My name is David Alade, and I'm the co-founder of Century Partners. Century Partners is a neighborhood-oriented development company that myself and Andrew Colomb, who's that gentleman sitting next to me, founded in 2014. And we consider ourselves to be real estate developers who have a true commitment to understanding the communities in which we work. And we have a genuine interest in equitable revitalization in the neighborhoods of the city. So what we think we do is pretty simple. We take places that are once abandoned, and we help bring them back to life. We help to make communities safer, wealthier, more connected. And we focus on concentrating investment in transition areas, so areas that are often otherwise neglected, overlooked, with the goal of accelerating revitalization, creating safe, clean, affordable housing options, and making sure that the growth that happens is a bit more equitable. Why do we do it? We know the impact that houses like that on the left can have on the psyche of the people who live and are surrounded by things that look like blight. We know the impact that vacant, damaged, abandoned houses have on the people that reside in those neighborhoods. And we know that housing rehab is, in many cases, the most cost-efficient option to deliver economically accessible housing to people in cities in the country. What makes us unique? I think a couple of different things. Our real goal is to provide affordable housing that people can access. And to do that, we've adopted a vertical delivery service approach, where we control the construction via our construction company of the houses that we rehab. We control the disposition, leasing, and sales and buying process via a real estate company that we own in-house. We do the property management ourselves, so we know our tenants, we know the people who live in the communities. The complaints come directly to us, and we can see how they're changing. And we have a nonprofit, Century Forward, that we control, which we use to lead the community engagement practice, as well as implement various green infrastructure interventions in the neighborhoods in which we work. One of the other things that my founder right there, Andrew Colomb, he is an artist. So we are big believers in the power of art. And we've created movies and houses that we've owned. We've sold them to artists. The power of art to own their means of production and benefit from a wealth perspective as their neighborhoods continue to change. Well, what do we impact? Well, we think one important thing is our work impacts the idea of what it means to be a developer and who a developer is supposed to look like. It's not necessarily an older, very wealthy, disconnected person who sits in an ivory tower. And we are able to successfully bring a wide variety of stakeholders. As you can see in this picture, we've got the mayor, district managers, community members, philanthropic folks represented here. Bring them together to think holistically to determine great solutions to solve some of the housing issues we're seeing in Detroit. I think another thing we do is there is a conception of what a developer looks like and what a developer does. And we try to break down why do people feel so negatively about developers. And we see that developers are either oftentimes focusing on higher end development that's beyond the reach of most people. When they do focus on single family housing, it's often in monolithic enclaves in the suburbs or at a higher economic price point that most people can access. When single family development does target working class folks, it's often in neighborhoods that really need investment, that have lots of social issues, and they're not very well maintained from a property manager perspective. And developers now are associated with things like physical displacement, wealth displacement, and oftentimes because of that disconnection, there's a displacement of accountability. And so we think we're a little different. We think our goal is really focused on bringing investment into neglected areas, starting now in Detroit. And this allows us to reduce the cost of housing on our acquisition basis, but also more importantly, increase access to home buyers and renters that are traditionally locked out of the market as prices continue to increase. We talked about the affordability issues we're seeing across the country. And the remodeling approach, because we're not doing at this point any new construction, because we're trying at most to preserve the structural integrity of the houses and assets that we acquire, we're able to keep costs down with our vertically integrated system to maintain affordability for folks who live in the city. And then the way we structure it, I think, is also a little unique. We have an equity fund that facilitates broad participation. So individuals can participate, can get involved in a way that traditionally they aren't able to in investing in neighborhoods in the city of Detroit. And for me, more interestingly, the way we're set up, we have an equity vehicle that allows longtime Detroiters to sit in that equity piece, or whether they're contributing a vacant asset or a small amount of money, they can participate in our equity vehicle and benefit as homes begin to appreciate and have a vested, tangible stake in the rental proceeds, disposition proceeds, financing proceeds as we continue our development work. And I think for us, Detroit, like many cities around the country, it is a predominantly African-American city. The residents here are 80% African-American. So we think it's critically important. We live in the city. We live in the neighborhoods that we're doing work in. And we are very conscious to hire locally. So we're hiring people who live in our city, allowing small contractors, subcontractors who are often shut out from some of the bigger city jobs, giving them continuous work. These are primarily African-American contractors to start growing their business. So they start off as 2 people, and then we've seen guys grow to 4, 5, 6, 7 people, and are able to compete now for some of the bigger city jobs. And in terms of who we're working with on the home buying side, we're actively in the neighborhoods, doing home buyer seminars, working with banks to make sure that the folks who live in these communities are very much aware of the resources out there to facilitate home ownership and get folks who really deserve it on their wealth building journey. And finally, these 3 pictures are from a neighborhood we're working in called the Fitzgerald neighborhood, where our team is responsible for the stewardship of about 250 parcels within a quarter square mile area. What we try to do is really dig deep roots in the community. And the photo to the left is my partner, Andrew, where it's a community cleanup event. The photo in the middle is a nonprofit we brought in called Brilliant Detroit that focuses on early childhood education. That was a vacant house, abandoned house. We built that house, renovated it at cost, and now that's a great community hub, not only for the kids who live in the neighborhood, but for seniors, and getting that intergenerational living right in the heart of this neighborhood. And we attend a lot of community meetings, and making sure that we don't view it as a chore, we view it really as an opportunity to get to know the people we're working with and figure out ways that they can actively participate from an equity perspective, from a wealth perspective in the work that we're doing. So I think that's all I got for you guys. Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you so much, David. And after each of these panelists present, and this will continue for most of the day, we will all join each other on the stage and have a conversation. And I am breezing through and not reading their full bios because they're in the pamphlet, right? Or in your brochure and on the web, and in the interest of really getting to some conversation, I'm going to go a little fast. So next I want to welcome to the stage Pete Gombert. Pete is the executive chairman of indieDwell, coming out of Boise, Idaho, as well as a new factory in Pueblo, Colorado. So take it away, Pete.
Thanks, Jenny. Oh, there's water up here. It is an honor to be here with so many people that are focused on what I see as, I agree with Chris, one of the most pressing issues facing the country today. I'd like to thank Harvard and Chris, and especially Clark, who's just been incredibly innovative and thoughtful about this prize and the way he went about constructing it for all of us. It has been hugely influential, as Chris mentioned, for our company because it gave a lot of legitimacy to what we were trying to accomplish. So thank you. There we go. So indieDwell, which I co-founded with Scott Flynn back in about 2016, is a public benefit corporation, which is a for-profit entity that has a social purpose, and our purpose is to build high-quality, healthy, durable, sustainable, and energy-efficient housing at the lowest price we possibly can build it for. When I think about innovation in the housing industry, I really think about things that we can do in 5 different areas. But when we founded indieDwell, we really wanted to focus on one area that was comprehensive above all, and that was partnerships. We don't think we can do this alone. We need communities that we work in. We need institutions that we work in to partner with us to really solve this problem. And I think that is something that David was really illustrative in pointing out. That community is coming together to solve this problem, and we think we need that broadly. So when we went to create our entity and fund our entity, we went out to the markets to find really, really solid partners that would help us to be able to scale our solution. And we've been able to do that in partnership with some of the largest institutions in the world that are really focused on this problem. When I think about the problem itself, I think about 5 different areas broadly that we can work in to help solve this problem: regulatory, design, materials, production methods, and finance. And indieDwell really focuses on 3 of those areas. But when I thought about it in preparing for this, nothing that we're doing is really all that innovative. And what I mean by that is if you look at design, this is a building that we're building down in Los Angeles, workforce housing down in Los Angeles. We build everything at a net zero ready level, so it's very, very energy efficient. We do focus on smaller footprint living. We think that that's really essential in today's market. And we focus on building intentional communities. So we don't want to just build housing, we want to build community. We think it's really, really important. None of that's innovative. People have been doing that for a long, long period of time. When you think about materials, we focus on some other elements that we think are really, really important. We only use really durable materials with long warranties so that we reduce ongoing operating expenses. We focus on using healthy materials so that the indoor air quality of our units is very, very high. We're taking some of the most at-risk people in our population and putting them in our housing. And we think it's really, really essential that the indoor air quality is high, and hopefully we reduce their healthcare bills over time. We focus on sustainability, so we only use green-guarded materials. And probably most notably, and what we're noted for the most, is the fact that we are upcycling shipping containers. None of these, again, are very innovative in and of themselves. Even the shipping containers, the first shipping container house was produced in 1986, so it was a long time ago, and it's not incredibly innovative. It's how we're pulling it all together. This is a permanent supportive housing project that we're actually building in LA. And then production methods. You know, obviously we use off-site construction, so we're a factory-built solution. We try to build approximately 90% in the factory and then deliver on-site and button up. We focus on human-powered factories. So in this age of automation, we're going backwards to the way they built the pyramids, which is fine by us. And you'll understand a little bit about why we do that here in a second, but nothing new there. We do focus on trying to be zero waste. We're very, very close. We're about 95% waste-free right now in our production process, which is a lot better than the standard construction industry. And we're focused on getting to carbon neutrality this year. So those are a little bit innovative. So when I think about those things, they're all really important, and collectively they do create a lot of impact, and there's a big innovation in what we're doing. But what I am most proud of, and what I think is the most innovative thing that we're doing, is actually our business model. So we, as I mentioned earlier, we're a public benefit corporation and a certified B corporation. And essentially what that means is that instead of having shareholder primacy as the singular thing that we're focusing on, we're actually taking an approach that has stakeholders as the single point of determination for all of the decisions that we're making. And when I say stakeholders, that means that the customers that we're serving, the employees that we have, the communities that we work in, the suppliers that we rely on, and the environment are all stakeholders in our business. And we want to take into consideration all of those stakeholders in everything that we're doing. And I think that's important because those 5 elements that I mentioned that really are paramount in solving the affordable housing crisis, most of those focus on the supply side of the equation. And broadly speaking, we think about how do we get more housing available out there. And when I think about the housing market, I think about it in a really bifurcated way. So there is the market rate, true free market housing, and then there's the affordable market, and affordable is just a nice word for subsidized. The subsidized market isn't a free market. It's a market that relies on external dollars to allow people to afford something that they can't otherwise afford. And that is inherently governed by the amount of public and philanthropic dollars that are available for that market. So what I like about what we're doing from a business model perspective is it not only focuses us on the supply side of the equation, which is critically important, we need more housing, but it also allows us to focus on the demand side of the equation. And when I talk about demand side of the equation, I am talking about that affordable demand. And if what we can do is reduce what is necessary or what is needed, reduce the demand in the affordable side of the equation, then we're really having some substantial impact. And I think it will take a focus on supply and demand in that affordable level to really solve the problem. So what does that look like? Well, if we go back to the Case-Shiller Homes Index, we can see that right now where we sit, we're at about 4.4. That's about the level we were at in 2005. Basically what this means is we are pushing more people down into the area where they do require subsidy, or they're overspending on their monthly bills. Basically they don't have the income to support the housing, which is what Chris was mentioning earlier. There's an institution in the country that thought, well, this is a national level view. It would be much, much better to look at this on a local level because housing is inherently local. And so what we see from this fine institution noted here is that this problem is truly the worst on the coasts and in the Rocky Mountains, but it is spreading across the country. And this is from 2017. A gentle prod to update this for 2019 would be wonderful. So what we're seeing is this problem is really exacerbated around the country, and our solution is to create a factory model that allows for equity and inclusion and allow it to spread quickly across the country. So we recently announced that we opened up we will be opening up our second factory that is in Pueblo. And the model is really predicated, again, on partnerships. So the model that the factory we're opening up in Pueblo, we did in conjunction with the Colorado Health Foundation, the Colorado Trust, the state of Colorado, and the city of Pueblo. And we really focus on some key elements on the demand side of the equation. So all of our factories are joint ventures in those local markets with local ownership in those factories, and most important, employee ownership. Employees own 20% of every factory that we set up, and every employee owns that from day one when they start. We pay a minimum of $16 an hour in the factory, and importantly, we intentionally locate our factories in markets that are in need of economic development. So while this factory will be serving the entire Front Range of Colorado, it's located in Pueblo, a town that is in need of economic development, where importantly, $16 an hour is a living wage, so they can afford the housing in that market. So every employee is an owner. Every employee has profit sharing in that business. We pay 100% of medical, dental, and vision for the employee. They have 20 days of paid time off, which is very uncommon in the construction industry. It's year-round full-time work, and we build exclusively with mission-aligned developers. So we do no market rate housing. Everything that we do is focused on the affordable market. These are the markets that we are currently deep into negotiations with. So there are an additional 8 markets around the country that we're focused on opening up over the course of the next 3 years. Those will be 10 factories producing about 3.2 million square feet of housing per year, roughly 7,000 housing units per year, with 2,000 plus employee owners. So we're really trying to, both with the housing, with the supply side of the equation, but also with our employment model, we're trying to create equity that raises up people and moves them out of the need for affordable housing and puts them into that market rate model. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. And I think this is pretty amazing that we have this range of practitioners here talking about grassroots redevelopment of existing stock, and then 2 very different takes on off-site construction, which leads me to our last presenter, who is also this year's winner of the Design and Construction Ivory Prize Innovation, Larry Pace of Factory OS.
Well, first, I just want to say, on behalf of all the employees of Factory OS and my co-founder partner, Rick Alade, thank you very much for having us here today. Clark, what you've put together is simply amazing, and we're very proud to be here. So, the bottom line is Factory OS. We're a volumetric construction company. We're located on Mirror Island, which is Northern California, outside of San Francisco. I think our first slide's ready to come up here. Great, well, there we go. So we're a volumetric construction company. Pete is a really hard act to follow because a lot of the things I was going to touch on, both as it relates to energy, employee benefits, we somewhat mirror image quite a few of the same ideals and same business practices that they follow. Myself and Rick first got into this roughly 5 years ago, and we did it because of the spiraling cost of construction, primarily in the affordable arena. We endeavored on a number of development deals where I worked with a number of different manufacturers, and then a little over 2 years ago, we decided, along with a number of investors, that we'd build our own facility, that our lessons learned and our experience both in the construction and development industry would allow us to be able to take things leaps and bounds beyond where they currently were at with some of our competitors. So thus, we created Factory OS. We started fabricating roughly 18 months ago. We just recently completed our 700 residential unit. By this time next year, we will be at a volume of doing between 1,250 and 1,500 units annually. And then within 1 year from now, a year from that point in time, we're planning on being able to do upwards towards 3,000. We are also getting ready to start our second facility, which will also be located at Mirror Island. And in 2021, we're hoping to open our third, or planning on opening our third, in Southern California. So next slide, please. As I'm sure all of you know from all the case studies you've looked at, our industry, and where we've watched manufacturing steadily increase in productivity and scale throughout the other industries, you can see construction has literally relatively run flat. I've been in this industry for over 40 years, and I got to tell you, the amount of ingenuity and change in our industry has been minimal. We believe, along with some of our competitors, that we are going to categorically be able to change that, to be able to do much better in relationship to productivity, a higher quality product, and higher standard of living, as well as take great care of our workers. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and have a short video being run here on our factory that the Clark and his group put together on Factory OS. And once again, on behalf of all the employees and myself of Factory OS, thank you very much for having us here today.
What you'll see out there is unbelievable natural light. This building that was a gift to Larry and me has beautiful windows that create a work environment that is inspirational for workers.
I think everyone that works here knows that they're doing something truly special and something that we're just the tip of the iceberg of what our capabilities ultimately are.
In 2014-15, as a developer, I was just looking at construction costs spiraling up. And so I sat down with Larry and said, I think we've got to do this with a different approach. I felt if we can build affordable housing at half the price of this spiraling number going up, we'll get twice as much out of it. And once we start doing that, it inspires people around us to help cut costs that are also affecting affordable housing.
So the best way for me to describe the factory to you is we're roughly 256,000 square feet. Our factory is made up of primarily 33 different workstations. So right here you see the floor of the actual modular is being built. All right, James, how you doing, man? This gentleman here is making sure that we're sanding down any joints and ridges that we have in our plywood to make sure that our floors are absolutely smooth and have zero transitional issues. As you come down here to station number 4, you're going to notice that all these floors are prepped and ready for interior wall sets. This is where Matt fabricates the interior walls and then sets them on the modulars before sliding them from station 5 to 6. How are you today, Matt?
I'm doing good, Larry.
What are we?
Second to none.
You betcha, baby. That's who we are. This is station number 6. This is where both sidewall jigs are made. It's also where we go ahead and set the sidewalls on the boxes themselves. You'll notice that all it takes here is one gentleman using the crane and one gentleman walking along with the wall. And that's literally, it's a two-man crew to set the walls. So once that volume moves from 7 over here to 10, the top will get set, it'll then get set in the queue, and then the balance of all finished work gets accomplished as it moves down the line to station 33. In case you didn't know, I love this place. Don't film Rick without his hard hat. He's one of my worst offenders. All of the volumes that leave Factory OS have a plywood sheathing over the top and then have an EPDM coating for weatherproofing to make sure that we get no water intrusion while in transit or while erecting on site. And then at the last station, we then ship them out. All right? Cool? We done? Yeah, Rick, get Rick.
This unit is Unit 205 of the Union, our project at the corner of 5th and Magnolia, 1 block from the West Oakland BART station.
If you can imagine this, a 5-story building will go up in 10 working days.
In 6 months, you'll leave this unit at 8 a.m. and be in San Francisco at 8:15. So you'll be in a unit that you go, I got a meeting in San Francisco in 15 minutes. You can walk out your home, be on a train, and be in the city at that meeting in 15 minutes.
Well, we actually owe that video to Abby Ivory, just for the record. All joking aside, Rick and I like to have a little levity in our lives, but both Rick and I are fairly well established and accomplished individuals within the construction and development industry. We took this on. We spent years studying the dynamics of different manufacturing plants, as well as working with the software providers. Our partnerships also speak volumes, whether it be Autodesk or Sage or manufacturing effect on. I could go on and on and on to the different organizations that we're involved with. Probably one of the ones that I'm the most proud of is the Carpenters Union. The Carpenters Union has absolutely, as you know, our mantra is second to none. They've been second to none in helping us to put together the workforce that allows us to run the facility we have, as well as the facilities we're getting ready to open. So, Rick and I did this with one simple principle in mind. We're going to help raise the quality of construction of multifamily residential projects while lowering the cost of multifamily residential projects and providing homes so that working class people can truly live in. So once again, thank you very much for having us. All of us at Factory OS, we're very proud to win the Ivory Prize, and we're proud to be here.
Larry, don't go too far. Bring you back to the stage.
Okay.
All right, now I'm going to welcome Pete and David and Larry up to the stage. I'm going to use the stairs so I don't. Yeah, it's great. Great. Again, I am so pleased to be here with the three of you, and also for you to really talk about some of your incredibly similar values just that are finding kind of purchase in different markets and with kind of different scales and effects. And in light of maybe this question back to the Ivory Prize prompt about scalability, I maybe wanted to kick it perhaps first to Pete and Larry, just talking about these new factories that are just underway, and maybe return a little bit and talk about what scalability also means to David. But maybe because we've just heard from Larry, and we've heard now that with the new Mare Island facility and the expansion to 2 to 3 others, what that sort of looks like for you and for the challenges that might come up with it.
Well, the way it looks for us is simply this. We've already leased our second facility on Mare Island. We plan on being open and ready for fabrication in March and April of 2020. It is a smaller facility than our current facility that you saw the video on, but we are prepared to be tooled up and ready to be in production in March, April of 2020. As far as, it's ironic. Everybody talks about the challenge of workforce and employees. We've actually had a tremendous success with the Carpenters Union in being able to get the employees that we need to man our facilities. And 50% of all of our employees we've trained ourselves along with the Carpenters Union. So we've already started embracing organizing our employee program for our second facility.
So you're already training the next team for the second facility.
We've already started training the next team of both management people as well as our A&E department, which is, a long-winded conversation that not everybody here is want to hear from me about. But our second facility will be coming online. I certainly tell everyone, coming to our facility, if you ever have the opportunity on Mare Island, it speaks volumes. It speaks far better than listening to me talk about it. Our third facility, we're looking at the Inland Empire in Southern California. I was there last week looking at different facilities, and we have every expectation of having a deal done there by the beginning of end of 2020, beginning of 2021, and opening our doors sometime, in the aspect of starting fabrication by middle of 2021.
And Pete, you've discussed the recent, which is not quite yet open, factory in Pueblo, and also this kind of incredible plans for 10 more. But similarly, I think this idea of how do you sort of onboard or get a factory up and running and talk about the kind of scale or working towards the scales of impact that are your ultimate goal.
Yeah, it's, we went out with intentionality around hitting scale, but our idea around scale was really to be distributed across the country. So rather than have centralized factories that produce a lot of units, we were really focused on certainly high levels of production, but being able to develop something that would be easily replicatable. And that's why our human-powered sort of approach to construction is really critical, because we can lease an existing space. We don't have heavy machinery or equipment requirements that force us to build our own custom factory setting, and we can ramp that up relatively quickly. So we focused really heavily on trying to figure out the processes that would be necessary, the software, the A&E, the things that could be centralized within the headquarters of the company, but then have all of the building functions happen there locally. And I think the other reason that we're moving so quickly is we do have partners coming to us, and because we are creating local joint ventures that are locally owned, locally operated with employee owners, there's a huge demand for sort of that type of situation where they can be involved and help us to move forward within that community, rather than us having to go out and say, we're going to be here, here, and here. So we're being drawn into the communities, and that's accelerating the process for us.
I also think it's such an interesting cross-section. We have the Bay Area, we have Pueblo, Colorado, which I've learned is the 6th most livable city in North America, apparently, and as you pointed out, the cost of living
very affordable
reinforces this idea that I think is really central to housing affordability as it intersects with design and construction, which is how can we make units that the people who build them are also perhaps able to afford to live in, right? And then we have, say, for example, the Fitzgerald neighborhood of Detroit, which the kind of massive influx of scale is not the appropriate response. So this kind of painstaking and loving lot by lot version of scaling up, David, I want to just talk to you a little bit about how the kind of scale of your current outreach and future plans might coincide.
Yeah, sure. So we think of scale in a couple different ways. We think of it in a very kind of hyper-regional level, and investing in a neighborhood that is in transition or that the broader market doesn't deem as valuable. And what we found is in these communities, particularly communities of color that have been bereft of investment, there is value there. The people there are valuable, their stories there are valuable, you have folks and residents who've lived there for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And so our strategy is to bring in, concentrate resources into these neighborhoods, have people see that are driving through that something different is happening here, and then facilitate as many home ownership opportunities as we can for first-time home buyers, and also work with the folks that live in the neighborhoods, whether it's allowing them to creating ways where they can invest alongside with us, or giving them information around, hey, there are people now asking about your house. Maybe you should hold on to it. Or how are ways you can finance, maintain the ownership of an asset that is appreciating. So that to us is really, really important. And I think for us, we also want to create more of us. So I think what we're doing is fine, but a lot of the big development companies need to do big projects to satisfy the cost of overhead. I mean, that's just the reality, of the situation for the most part. But small developers, if you don't have such massive overhead, you really can target specific neighborhoods, target single-family housing in transition areas where you're not selling houses for $1 million, but we're selling houses for $50,000, brand new houses effectively, $70,000, $100,000, $200,000, and in many cases, selling them where your continued operating cost, your mortgage, your insurance is oftentimes less than what you pay to rent a house that's in inferior condition. So I think that mentality, getting other developers into the space, mentoring other folks around Detroit and other folks that reach out to us around the country about how they too can invest in their communities, that their communities have value, and they have a responsibility, if they so choose, to elevate that value so other market participants can recognize it. And so for us, it's getting equity, cash equity, on a market rate basis into these neighborhoods. It's getting philanthropy where appropriate in these neighborhoods. It's getting the city to focus on policies that really build up these neighborhoods, to get them on a sustainable basis. We think that intersection is really important to ultimately provide a fully sustainable ecosystem where the community is self-sustaining and not dependent on those subsidized sources to be vibrant.
Yeah, and I think this idea of creating a model and a model of success that can be reproduced in other contexts is really vital. And I think maybe where that's another kind of point that links the three of you in my mind is thinking about inclusion and equity around labor practices that you're all clearly deeply invested in. And I think this this sort of scale of the smaller contractor who maybe has difficulty without a kind of continued volume and support for that scale of development, to me, resonates with the kind of company ownership by employees, as well as, Larry, your focus on union laborers, as well as inclusion of women in particular, or other kind of less typical construction labor participants within the factory setting. So I don't know if I think this is another thing that honestly you guys are so impressively committed to the kind of quality, not just of the final product, but obviously of the kind of full ecology of the design and construction lifespan. So I don't know if there's, are we missing key ideas here? I think
a huge part of Factory OS. I mean, you know, as Peter said, I think we all have a common goal, and that's to lower the cost of housing, to build high quality projects. Certainly at Factory OS, we concentrate on doing large multifamily residential, urban projects. Don't necessarily need to be urban, but urban type projects. But I happen to be a big champion of our employees. The fact that we train our employees as we do and give them a toolbox of talent and trade knowledge that will last them the rest of their life in any endeavor they ever go on, I'm extremely proud of, and I know my partner Rick Alade is, as well as everyone else that works at Factory OS. Scalability. Rick and I only got into this venture with the full understanding that we were doing this because we wanted to leave a meaningful impact as our legacy. We wanted to help lower the cost of housing with higher quality construction, and we wanted to see it go to scale so that we can be part of the solution of what is absolutely a desperate problem, certainly in the state of California and the western United States. We have a lack of everything from affordable housing to workforce housing. I was telling some folks this morning that I met with, I also own a construction company in California, and on my job sites that I've got for my construction company, our average employee spends 2.5 to 3 hours a day windshield time coming and going to work. It's just, the whole thing's not sustainable anymore. So.
Yeah, I'd add to that just a touch. We very intentionally try to focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And one of the things that I think is beautiful about this industry broadly, and I think Larry just touched on it a little bit, is we can bring people in that don't generally have the opportunity to work towards a career, that are working in jobs that are keeping them down in that level where they are absolutely dependent on subsidies or continuing to live with their parents, things becoming multi-generational, and we give them a path forward, and that's really important. There are not a lot of industries that are growing and expanding and have such a demand for labor that can bring people in, expose them to a number of different trades, train them up, and then give them a career path. We hope that they stay with us. We hope that they love the fact that they're owners in the business and that they really do prosper over time with us. But if they want to take those skills and take them out into a marketplace where they might be able to push themselves further, that's fantastic. We have a woman in our factory who came in with no construction experience whatsoever, and was recently promoted to be a stage lead for us, which is, to me, it's one of my things that I'm most proud of in what we've accomplished so far, is we're giving people opportunity to move ahead in their careers. So I think this industry, broadly speaking, whether it is the work that David's doing, which I just love, and the focus on equity which is so critical, or the modular industry and the fact that we work in a more controlled environment, and that we can operate those environments in communities that are away from the truly hyper demand of housing, so that the wages we pay are living wages. There's so much opportunity in this industry to get it right if we focus on all the sides of the equation.
But I think, Peter, you touched on it earlier when you were speaking. The environmental impact that our firms are leaving is far less than what traditional construction is. We also, and like I said, I want to just repeat what Peter said, the waste. We have very little waste compared to traditional construction, let alone, everything you were touching on earlier, the windshield time, the traffic impact, and everything associated with it. I honestly believe, and I believe this from my heart, from the bottom of my heart, that the time for change has come. We are moving heaven and earth to try to accelerate the activities so that we can help bring down the cost of housing, as well as bring up the quality of life for our workers. So, that's what we're all about. The other thing at Factory OS that we don't have time to talk about today, but, OS, when we first came up with that, it was Nancy Holiday, and it was for off-site. Well, actually, it stands for our operating system as far as I'm concerned. And for some of the folks I met with earlier today, the construction industry, once again, the A&E side of it and the software work that we're doing with Autodesk as well as other software folks is pretty unprecedented. It'll also help accelerate construction and allow computational design to really take hold in the construction industry, which it never has to date.
No,
And for us, we believe people don't really live in homes; they live in communities, they live in neighborhoods. What's surrounding, what you wake up to every morning is far more important than oftentimes the physical condition of your home. And so that's part of the reason why we do have this vertically integrated approach. Where in one of our neighborhoods in that Fitzgerald project I talked about earlier, because we control the construction company, I can hold them to a standard, say, hey, we need to get more people who live in this neighborhood involved. And over the course of 6 months, we were able to hire 40 people, residents who lived in the neighborhood, to involve them in some form of improving your neighborhood, whether it's clearing debris from homes, whether it's vacant lot clearing, whether it's snow removal, whether it's lawn maintenance, get them integrated so they don't feel like development is happening at them. They feel like it's happening with them as a partner in a partnership model, and that they're benefiting from an economic perspective. And the folks that are able to come to work every day, who show a desire to a strong commitment to the fields, we've been able to hire them full-time to our construction company. I think we've got 3 people we've hired full-time from that workforce development program. From a sales and leasing perspective, through the brokerage, I can really control, hey, where are we marketing the sale of these houses? Like, who's really benefiting from the work that we're creating? And obviously, we're not discriminating, but making sure that we're targeting our marketing efforts in the community so that the folks who have withstood some really, really tough times in Detroit, they're able to not just from a psychic perspective or from a fiscal equity perspective and a wealth building perspective benefit from the change that's happening to the community. And even via our nonprofit, A Century Forward, the foundations are really critical in a place like Detroit that's had such poverty for so long. Like, how do we create ways where they feel like the foundations aren't superimposing themselves, into the neighborhood, carrying busloads of people, and we create a rule where if people reach out to us, they're asking for a tour, they in turn have to perform some level of community service and sit with the community, and that's what the community wants. And after their tour, engage with the community. So, and we kind of think of inclusion away from just who is an essentially partner employee, but also who we're there to serve, and how do we make sure as many people as possible physically benefit from what's happening, and if folks who live in residents that live in neighborhoods, they feel like that their neighborhood is changing with them as an informed party as opposed to in spite of them.
Right on. Great.
And before we open it up to questions, I think that this idea around how do you kind of transmit this story or propel the impact of each of your efforts forward. And I really think this is a kind of amazing model, David, that you're bringing up, where to kind of bring someone in and have them understand what it is that you're doing, you're also asking them to participate, and that the sort of adaptive and agile way in which we can understand the changing needs of communities, and that even the kind of maybe some misconceptions from outside around ways to address those needs are actually now kind of person-to-person storytelling. I think you've all done kind of an amazing job telling that story. But, all right, I think we're going to open up to some questions from the audience before we move on to our next panel. So I think we have a roving mic, I believe.
Hey, David, could you tell us a little bit about your equity fund What type of investors do you have? What type of return they get? And how's that functioning?
Yeah, sure. So our equity fund is a friends and family fund. The first one in Detroit, we started very small, raised about $1 million. And the way it works is if you have $10,000, if the fund is worth $1 million, you will own 1%. You have a pro rata share in all the distributions of that fund. So Century Partners, as the kind of general partner, we're managing the delivery and the investment of those properties and the rehab and creating kind of value. One thing I think that's very unique in Detroit, you had a dynamic where individuals would buy the house next door to them from the Wayne County auction for oftentimes as little as $500 or $1,000 in 2012, 2013. And when we arrived, we saw that this was happening. These folks had boarded up their homes next door to them. They would mow the lawn. They really did it as a sign to signal their confidence in their neighborhood, protecting the value in their neighborhood. But they didn't have the $100,000 it costs to renovate it. And so the normal cost of development, a developer would buy that home, hopefully at a market reasonable rate, and the developer would capture all the upside. And what we've been able to do in that scenario where the person bought the house next door to them for $1,000, it's now 3 years later that house, let's say, is worth $20,000. We've been able to purchase that house from them for a combination of cash and equity. So let's say in one case, that house that we acquired for $20,000, $10,000 went to cash and it was distributed in cash to that person, and $10,000 was received as an equity investment into our vehicle, and that person was treated similarly to all of our other friends and family who invested alongside with us. And now that person owns not only a piece of that one house that's next door to them that they saved, that deserve to benefit fiscally from what happens next, but also a piece of the other homes on the same street in the neighborhood that they've lived in for oftentimes 10, 20, 30 years, and benefit from a wealth perspective from the renovations that we're doing and the leasing proceeds when we lease it out, and ultimately financing when we refinance out the equity, and ultimately sale when we sell in a couple of years. So that's broadly how it works.
Hi, David. I'm Nicola Williams from Cambridge. And my question to you is, we have a wealth crisis here in the greater Boston area with the net worth of African Americans at $8 compared to whites at $275,000, the average net worth. And so my question to you is, how have you measured the impact of building wealth within your community, the model of that you're employing where you're actually providing opportunities for wealth building? How have you measured that, and what's the impact in terms of the wealth building that you've done?
Let's take a first crack at it.
I think it's you, David.
I think that was you. Super easy, simple question. Right? I think for us, we look at it in two ways. Because we're able to invest with equity, oftentimes we're able to invest significantly more than what that home would naturally appraise for. So when we first came to Detroit, we noticed within even a block difference, there could be a 90% conversion in price. What the value of a home right here is $10,000, and that same house 1 block north was $100,000. And you examine why is that? Are there some physical factors? There's more dilapidation, more vacancy, more crime on that street, but also the banks are refusing to lend. And so what we've been able to do is invest many times twice as much as what a home would appraise for in cash with the folks that support us, invest in a concentrated way, such that, and by investing on several houses at a time, investing in a more holistic sense, when banks come and then do their appraisals, or when people look to purchase homes, that drives up the value. It's not only the value for us, but it's the value for those folks who owned the houses in these neighborhoods. I mean, Detroit has one of the highest, historically had one of the highest percentages of black home ownership in the country. And then they got hit really hard during the recession, and now we're seeing things come up. But it's only via concentrated kind of catalytic investment that has to have a longer time horizon and has to have faith that this neighborhood is valuable. And we're kind of putting our money where our mouth is. We're we're signaling to folks that we believe it has value, and over time, as the neighborhood improves, as more folks, some of the existing neighbors maybe decide to pay more attention to their lawn maintenance or get around to fixing their porch or roof because they're sitting next to a well-rehabbed home as opposed to a vacant one, or other developers see that we're not going in and slum loading houses out. We're doing really high quality renovations and attracting tenants that respect the neighborhood, respect the residents, respect the community. That's having a holistic wealth creation benefit for the folks that never left Detroit and withstood some pretty tough times. More kind of a financial engineering thing we've been able to do is in the neighborhood of Fitzgerald, we've been able to use the community development block grants, which is a federal program, to effectively create a massive housing subsidy for homeowners. So traditionally, these programs are really used to build affordable units where low to moderate income home renters can use. So we're turning that a little bit on its head. And in this case, this is really catalytic investment to get the market started. We'll oftentimes purchase a home and invest, in some cases, upwards of $170,000 for a home that will only appraise for $90,000. So that person that we're selling that home to, and that's a low to moderate income home buyer who makes below 80% of the area median income, they're immediately, day one, effectively stepping into as much as $100,000 in equity. And they're buying a house, they're using traditional mortgages. We're effectively forcing the banks to lend to this area and working with the city government to walk them through every single step of the home buying process. So that person who was previously paying $1,000 to rent a poorly managed property is now stepping into a home that they own. A mortgage, a 30-year finance mortgage, which is the biggest creative wealth in U.S. history, is a 30-year mortgage, and paying $400 a month. And so you think about what that does from the free cash flow they have to invest in other things, from a home that's at the very beginning of a neighborhood that is going to experience significant pricing appreciation. Instead of gentrification happening at them, they're going to be a benefit. It's going to benefit them. We're going to see people fiscally benefit because they're getting in at the beginning at a very affordable, accessible price point. And I think Detroit is a little bit different than a lot of other cities, maybe like Boston. I'm from New York, so certainly like New York, and certainly on the West Coast, housing values are still accessible. And so I think sometimes I feel a little disappointed when the gentrification narrative is forced onto a community where it doesn't exactly apply. And a lot of our work is exposing people and telling them about that they can very affordably own homes in areas that will appreciate, giving them the tools and resources and convincing particularly the banking community to lend in these areas to get this wealth building on the right pace.
Right.
Hope that answers your question, Woodward.
I think I'm going to stretch the time by just saying, can we have time for one more quick question? Chris, are you not? Okay.
Just real quick for Larry and for Pete. Quick question for Larry and for Pete. One of the challenges with respect to modular is you've got to transport the houses to the location on the site. How far can that radius be in terms of what you've done and still be economical?
Well, I'll speak on behalf of Factory OS. I mean, we certainly from Merritt Island can go to Seattle to San Diego. One of the reasons that we're expanding is because, as I stated earlier, we always did this with a complete intention of having it scalable. I believe that economically, we can go from Seattle to San Diego.
And that's for multifamily, obviously.
I'm sorry, what?
That's for multifamily housing.
That's for multifamily housing, correct.
How about you, Pete? What's your
I think that, it's part of the model and why we're going with what I call micro factories around the country is because we want to limit the distribution radius. Easily 200 miles is very, very easy. It's $3 a mile to ship a module. So depends on what you're building, obviously. We build everything from single family all the way up to commercial multifamily. And there is price sensitivity depending on the market that you're delivering to. We're doing a similar program down in Pueblo where we're building a large 435 unit housing subdivision that's all single family home ownership opportunities. And there we're shipping it 10 miles. So it's pretty inexpensive, but we'll ship stuff up to Denver, which is 150 miles, very easily. In fact, we're shipping a module this week or actually a duplex from Boise to Virginia. that we're setting up at the Virginia Housing Conference, Governor's Housing Conference. That is not affordable. That's $22,000 in shipping, so you don't want to do that.
Yeah. All right, I think as we wrap it up, I would encourage everyone to go and visit Century Partners indieDwell and Factory OS. There are a kind of myriad wonderful videos of all three of these gentlemen, and one in particular maybe of Pete's. One of the modules ending up on the National Mall as a kind of demonstration, and I think maybe for some of the audience in the kind of design world in this room, how all three of your approaches intersect with exactly this pain point of the single-family house ballooning up to 3,500 square feet and changing hearts and minds about what is a reasonable amount of space to have is kind of the thing we didn't yet get to, but I think is another thing in common with all three. All right, well, thank you so much, and
Thank you.